For centuries, we've searched for the seat of the soul, probing folds of gray matter, tracing neural impulses, believing that somewhere in the circuitry of the brain, the mystery of consciousness would at least surrender its secrets. But it hasn't. Despite all the advances of neuroscience, despite the PET scans, the EEGs, the neural correlates mapped and measured, no scientist, no experiment, no peer-reviewed journal has ever been able to show how the experience of self, the raw inner sense of I am, arises from the electrochemical chatter of neurons.
Are you discounting whether the brain controls consciousness?
No, I think what we would say is the brain is a reducing valve or filter that allows primordial consciousness in. That is, the brain is not the creator of it.
And I don't think the issue is scientific. The fundamental questions about the nature of consciousness and whether there is a soul are just not scientific questions. They're questions like, what exactly is a thought? What is a semantic meaning? And in fact, there hasn't been a single discovery in neuroscience or any other branch of science that a dualist, that is one who believes in the soul and consciousness, could not easily accommodate within his theory.
And yet, a consensus holds firm in the halls of mainstream science that the mind is merely what the brain does. This view, reductive physicalism, is not just a theory, it is an orthodoxy, a dogma, one that shapes what gets funded, what gets published, and ultimately, what gets believed.
And in this process is one of the greatest remaining mysteries in science and philosophy. How does consciousness happen? Somehow, within each of our brains, the combined activity of many billions of neurons, each one a tiny biological machine, is generating a conscious experience. And not just any conscious experience, your conscious experience right here and right now.
But what if the mystery of consciousness refuses to be reduced? What if, by clinging so tightly to a purely physicalist model of the mind, we are blinding ourselves to the deeper truth? Long before laboratories, before MRIs, before the Western model of science found its footing, there were minds contemplating the mind. Cultures across the globe, from forest canopy to the Himalayan peaks, have articulated profound insights into consciousness, memory, intention, and the very essence of the soul. But these voices were not merely ignored, they were silenced. As colonial powers marched across the continents, they brought not just guns and flags, but assumptions about what counted as knowledge, who counted as intelligent, and what counted as real. The sacred philosophies of indigenous peoples were dismissed as superstition. The contemplative sciences of the East were exoticized, distorted, or erased. And yet, some of these discarded worldviews now echo with truth. Dr. David Peat, a physicist who once worked with the legendary David Bohm, found his understanding of quantum theory transformed not in a lab, but in a teepee. Spending time with Blackfoot elders, Peat discovered that their cosmology, rooted in relationality, cycles, and consciousness as foundational, mirrored in stunning ways the non-locality and entanglement described by quantum mechanics. These weren't primitive metaphors, they were accurate models, and yet science had ignored them for centuries. In the 1800s, Indian Ayurvedic texts describe the mind as not housed in the brain alone, but dispersed throughout the body, a concept ridiculed by British medical authorities during colonization. Today, Western science acknowledges the enteric nervous system, the second brain, and the role of the gut in emotion and cognition. The wisdom was there all along. In the high Andes, the Quechua and Aymara people speak of time not as something we move forward into, but as something that comes from behind us. What is seen is past, what is unknown lies ahead, out of view. Linguists laughed until recent cognitive studies showed that their conception maps more accurately onto how the brain registers uncertainty and memory, spatially and metaphorically. And in sub-Saharan Africa, the Yoruba concept of Ori, the inner spiritual head, the divine consciousness within, was long deemed mysticism. But its core idea that identity and purpose are non-material and pre-existent now finds curious resonance in theories of panpsychism and the role of observer participancy in quantum physics. Western science did not merely neglect these truths, it actively suppressed them, branding them unscientific, not on the basis of evidence, but on the basis of power. And in doing so, it amputated its own progress. If we are to solve the mystery of the mind, we must be willing to learn not only from our instruments, but from the voices that colonialism tried to erase. Because the truth never belonged to just one culture.